Dad decided not to get an Icon Pass this year. Instead, we're making home movies in the garage.
Cut!
But every movie he makes is about skiing. Why didn't you just get the Icon Pass?
Why do you keep bringing that up?
To be honest, I'm a little worried about him.
Hello everyone, I'm Joe McDonald, head of WGSN Insight, and over the next 45 minutes or so I'm going to run you through some of the top trends for the outdoor industry across the coming year 2021. But before we kick off, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about who we are as WGSN. So we're actually the world's largest trend forecaster, and we're constantly monitoring the signals of change, looking at how consumers think, how they feel, how they behave. And we've got this team of experts, and they try and connect the dots between data and culture, which allow you to think about the products, experiences, and services that people are going to need in the year to come. And really, the point of this is to help brands stay relevant and to secure their place in the future. And we do this by scanning the global landscape. So by focusing on helping you creating products and experiences that stay relevant. And we've got this extensive network of industry experts in 15 different offices, 15 regional offices. And we've got a community of over 43,000 product designers and thought leaders across 32 global markets. So as I mentioned before, I'm Joe McDonald. I'm head of WGSN Insight. And this is a rather flattering photo of me on a motorbike. And I wanted to include it because it's a really nice photo, as you can see. But also because I'm not with you there in person, I wanted to show you who I am. And a little bit about me. So before I joined WGSN a couple of years ago, I worked in advertising and media agencies. So I worked for WPP and for Omnicom, and I worked specifically in the sport, partnership, and entertainment space. So pairing brands with celebrities, movie franchises, sports teams, and I worked with clients like Rolex, HSBC, Volvo, Unilever, Porsche, and paired them with organizations like Chelsea Football Club, Man City Football Club, and events like Wimbledon. And a little bit about Insight as a product. So Insight is WGSN's consumer-focused vertical. And really, it looks specifically at how consumers' beliefs and actions and opinions are going to interact with brands and industries and the world at large. And what this does is it allows us to look at the macro picture within society, but then also drill down into an industry to show how this is going to change across the next 5 years or so. And we've been doing it for a while. We've been doing it since 1998. And this is actually one of my favorite trends that we predicted and tracked. And it came about as a direct result of the financial crisis, but also this growing focus on wellness. And again, of course, this is picking up, again, as we all work from home and look for more comfortable clothing. And I know the term athleisure perhaps is a controversial term because, we like to think of high impact and low impact sportswear, but kind of ignore the term and you can see the way that we've tracked the trend across the time period. And then this here is another really nice trend. And again, it comes back from our color team. And this was all about the growth of Millennial Pink. And we were looking at the color and tracking the color way back in 2014, long before Apple did their rose gold iPhone and before we started seeing it appear in cafes and smoothie shops all over the world. So the best way to think about trend forecasting is to think about these larger scale societal shifts. So think about distilling the trends that are going to be impacting the outdoor industry, but to begin with, looking at the macro trends and then drilling these down through consumer and industry specific filters. So a macro trend is something which impacts society at large, and these are the macro scale shifts or drivers which are impacting consumers and businesses. And really, the way that these intersect with industries kind of vary depending on the industry and depending on the consumer, but it provides a really good overall basis for us to understand the trends that we're going to be looking at today. So in terms of the macro trends changing the world around us, there are 5 here that I'm going to run through, and we're going to go through all of these in a lot more detail with some examples, but I thought I'll go through them at a top line level now. So firstly, Community 3.0, and this is a bit of a recurring theme across today, which is that the coronavirus pandemic has accelerated trends that we were already seeing in the market. And really, Community 3.0 is about refocusing and recentering on local community. And obviously, this is happening all over the world at the moment because we've all become much more community orientated. And the second is all about the environment. And what's happened here is that the pandemic has challenged these established norms and shown to consumers that rapid change is possible. And what's happened is that everything from governments to businesses, we've grounded flights, we've closed stores, we've closed workplaces to prevent the spread of the pandemic. And what this means for the other great crisis, the environmental crisis, is that it's shown to consumers that rapid action from governments is possible. And what that's doing is causing a demand for greater change in relation to the environment. The next driver is radical reform, and really this centres on the changing relationship with diversity. And the events of last year showed that society is demanding real change, and this does have implications for brands. And posting a black square on Instagram isn't enough, and consumers want to see more. The other trend that, again, I'm sure everyone's aware of because we've been living it, is the home hub. And this centres around the fact that our homes have become our whole world. And your garden or your local neighbourhood is becoming a central focal point in your life. And this theme of restorative nesting is emerging here. And then the last trend is the frugal economy. And this focuses on the uncertainty and the fact that consumers are sheltering in their homes and they're adopting this really thrifty mindset. And make, do, and mend, crafting, these have all taken massive upticks in popularity. And this is more than a trend. This is more than a driver, because for younger generations like Gen Z, it's emerged as a real necessity because they've been so hard by the recession, because they've lost jobs and they've lost opportunities. So we're going to go through these in around 45 minutes. And you don't have to screenshot every page. There's a bit.ly at the end with access to our white papers, so you can get a little bit more information on these trends and how to use them and apply them to your business. So diving straight into Community 3.0, obviously the pandemic's rapid onset and really uncertain outcome resulted in neighbours mobilising to support one another. And this sentiment played out across the globe. And community spirit in the face of adversity reinforced how vital these local communities are at forming and maintaining and at playing a role in our physical and mental and even financial well-being. And what's happened is communities are beginning to think more cohesively. And there's this real desire to reframe the agenda on housing, the environment, employment, social justice. And these are all going to be foundational in how we think about community moving forward across this year and even further. And there's a real interconnected impact here. So in many regions, what the pandemic's done is expose these systemic gaps in the access to basic care provisions. So this strengthening of community bonds is partly driven by the need to fill these gaps left by the inaction of governments. But it goes a little bit deeper than that, because there's this rising distrust in governments and institutions. And actually, there's also this dissatisfaction with capitalism. So the 2020 Edelman Trust Barometer survey showed that over half of respondents believe that capitalism is doing more harm than good. And what's happened is that people have started to look for practical support networks. They're looking to their neighbours to help them to weather the storm. And they're forming these social synapses, which have been caused by the pandemic. But in the coming years, networks of formal and informal communities are going to grow stronger, and these synapses are going to become more important. And then this is a really nice example from Nike in LA, and they've opened a community store in Watts, and it's been described as a store for the people, by the people. So 85% of the staff live within a 3-mile radius. And this is actually the brand's 8th store using this format in the US. And it goes as far as even the merchandise in the store is tailored to a local customer base. So there's a range of Watts branded products. So it's Nike, it's the Nike we all know, but it's also local. And we're seeing similar things emerge in Brazil. So the Sao Paulo-based brand Von Trapp works with fabric leftovers and Brazilian textiles. And they focus again on regional production, local communities, supporting them and tailoring for them. And these are both large brands, but they're focusing on community. And as a result, they're building brand affinity. And this idea of community is coming together in some really nice ways. So especially when you start thinking about the active and the outdoor space. So some of you might be familiar with the act of plogging, which is picking up trash and jogging. But we're seeing this emerge more and more with hikers and local community groups as a way of keeping their local space looking clean and pristine throughout lockdown. And in South Korea, it's going a little bit further. So there's this group known as the Clean Hikers, and they host monthly events with the aim of cleaning up as much trash as possible from their local area, their local mountains. And they actually use the trash they've collected to create sculptures of local wildlife that's at risk, to highlight to everyone the issues with leaving rubbish everywhere. And then similarly, there's an initiative in China called the Clean Up China program, which is run by footwear brand Vibram. And they've sent out their trail running team to pick up garbage along the kind of training routes. And then, again, I'm sure everyone listening is familiar with Adidas's partnership with Parley, which is focused on removing plastic from the oceans and actually turning it into garments. So kind of staying with this idea and taking it a little bit further, the US apparel brand Keep Nature Wild collects a pound of trash for every product it sells. And it's also got these cleanup events. So cumulatively, they've collected 350,000 pounds of garbage, and they've got this mission to remove 1 million pounds of trash by 2023. And they've also launched a Wild Keeper initiative, which encourages local community to apply to be brand ambassadors to promote picking up garbage in their local area. And again, outdoor brands usually lead the way in this sustainability space. But the thing that we really like about these initiatives is that they go all the way from a grassroots level right up to corporate. So it's beyond just greenwashing. It's direct action that everyone who's involved with the brand, whether they're an employee or a customer, can get involved with. And then this coming together of community doesn't just revolve around space. So it's also about local people. And there's lots of nice examples that I want to call out throughout this presentation, especially in the next section, which is radical reform. But here's a nice combination of elite level sport supporting the local community. So some of you might be familiar with the Legion of LA, and they've got partnerships with Zwift and with Rafa. But they've also got this really progressive model, and they're aiming to become the only black-owned cycling team in the US. And they're currently doing that, and they're inspiring children to step out of this idea of cycling being an elite walled garden of exclusion. So they've set up a GoFundMe page and have already hit their target, and they're using this money to help kids from every background across LA get on a bike and try the sport. So building on that theme is our next driver, which is radical reform. And citizens are questioning the foundations of the structures and the societies that they inhabit. And they're pushing back on the root causes of injustice, not just the symptoms. And there's this mass awakening that racial and educational inequalities are inextricably linked. And as a result, individuals, organizations, groups are beginning to champion solutions to ensure that systemic change is enforced. So the events around the murder of George Floyd last year pushed racism back onto the agenda, and also pushed consumers who may have been removed from the issue to have to confront it and to have to think about it. And we're seeing this growth of action accountability. And here the point comes forward that a black square on a social media page isn't a diversity plan, and consumers realize this. And they expect brands and retailers to hold themselves accountable for diversity at every level of the business. And there's some really interesting things here that I want to call out. So first of all, the 15% pledge, and then the board challenge, and they're both gaining momentum. And this mirrors the fact that black people in the US comprise 15% of the population. And therefore, the 15% pledge petitions retailers to commit 15% of their shelf space to black-owned businesses. And it's already gaining traction. So companies like Sephora, Rent the Runway, West Elm have all signed up. And actually, in October last year, Macy's became the largest retailer to commit to the pledge. And actually, Macy's have gone a step further and are aiming to achieve 30% ethnic diversity at a senior level by 2025. And then some other companies in the space, Starbucks and Google, have both taken public pledges to ensure a more diverse and inclusive workforce. So by 2025, Google aims to have 30% of its senior leadership team comprised of underrepresented groups. And Starbucks is aiming to have 30% of its entire corporate workforce identify as BIPOC by 2025. So again, focusing back onto the outdoor space, this is developing in some really interesting ways. So one of them is more diverse groups are mobilizing online and offline to reclaim Indigenous land and reconstruct this outdoorsy narrative. So there's two collectives that I really want to call out here, and they're Hike Club and Indigenous Women Hike. And their mission is resonating en masse with consumers. So Indigenous Women Hike set out to reconnect their ancestral homelands while decolonizing the history of certain territories. And the founders' aim is to reclaim the popular John Muir Trail in the Sierra Nevada mountain range in California. And originally, this trail was known as the Numupoyo by the indigenous community. And the collective has amassed 70,000 Instagram followers and is ensuring that the original caretakers of the land are not erased from history by leveraging social media and by raising awareness and explaining the message. And actually, there are a couple of progressive collectives within this space challenging the norms of who's expected to be in an outdoor environment. So the first one is Latinx hikers, and they're focused on inspiring more Latinx to embrace hiking and advocating for inclusion and equality in the outdoors. And they're doing it by adopting this outreach approach. Melanin Base Camp, in a similar effort to Hike Club, their mission is to grow the visibility of outdoorsy BIPOC across all mediums. So specifically focus on advertising, but also media outlets as well. And then Unlikely Hikers, and this is an Instagram collective, and it's a diverse, anti-racist, body-liberated outdoor community. And they specifically focus on featuring the underrepresented outdoor person. So they've got more than 100,000 social followers, and recently they've started a podcast featuring stories from underrepresented groups with their experiences of actually going outside. And then the Outbound Collective. So this group is aimed at building a more equitable and inclusive outdoor narrative, and they've got an app and an online program and a social media presence. And actually what you can do is search for adventures, lodgings, tours all over the world, and they'll show them to you. And in October, they actually launched a 3-month paid writers residency for underrepresented and marginalized communities, again, to share their story about the outdoors. And then the last one that I want to call out is Black Girls Hike. And this is a UK initiative, which is an inspiring walking group. And it creates a safe space for like-minded women to be active and to support each other and themselves while outdoors. So this is a UK example, but I wanted to put it in. And when the person who is in charge of the Lake District, which is the UK's kind of biggest, most famous national park, and his name is Richard Leaf, which is a great name for someone who runs a national park, obviously. But he said that they need to change their approach to diversity to encourage more of it. And the right-wing press in the UK were up in arms, saying that identity politics had no place in the outdoors. And actually, the collectives and influencers that I mentioned on the last slide are really important, because non-white people are up to 6 times less likely to go hiking. And this lack of diversity in the outdoors is increasingly being challenged at a grassroots level, as we've seen, but it's also being challenged at a brand level. So in October last year, the North Face entered the conversation with its Reset Normal initiative. And this is a campaign that works with creatives and experts to inspire outdoor exploration while also addressing inequality. And they've also launched this Explore Fund Council, which workshops solutions to increase access to exploration as a whole. And then in a similar vein, the activewear brand Free People Movement partnered with Hike Club that we mentioned before. And they wanted to address the disproportionate representation in national parks. And what they did is they looked at the racial breakdown of park visitors and announced they'd be giving away national parks passes to BIPOC every month until March this year. So the next macro driver or macro trend impacting the world is the environmental crisis. And really, I'm not going to dwell here because everyone in this Zoom call knows how important the environmental crisis is and that it's becoming increasingly unavoidable. But we are at this critical point, and not to take a sustainable stance is to be complicit. And companies, brands, corporations need to understand and implement sustainable initiatives that align with their consumers' values. So at WGSN, we say invest now, pay later. And this is very much the consumer's mind frame on this. So looping back to coronavirus, the tourism industry is already being reshaped due to the lack of travel. And actually what this means is that there's this real scope here to build back better. And we're seeing this emerge within the regenerative tourism movement. And this is this idea that once you visited somewhere, you actually leave it in a better state than when you found it. And there's lots of companies in this space. So regenerative travel has this motto where your vacation meets your values. And they list hotels and resorts and they curate it by the environmental and social impact. So they actually look at stuff like carbon usage, employee well-being, guest activities, and also local foods and the benefit to the local community. And we're also starting to see governments align with this regenerative tourism message. So actually Tourism New Zealand is working towards measuring the well-being of the country, human health, and the extent to which communities are preserved, all as metrics of success alongside the kind of more standard economic metrics. And kind of translating this to your industry and to product development, as regenerative tourism goes mainstream, companies need to assess how to align with this new travel industry. So, for travel accessory brands, investing in sustainable product collections is going to be essential. And the perfect example of this is Hawaii's ban on all sunscreen which contains oxybenzone because it damages coral reefs. And Hawaii's taken this really strong stance at a kind of local government level, and brands are going to have to adapt. But why not adapt early? And if you're a sun cream brand, remove oxybenzone completely, and thereby you're putting a flag in the ground and you're taking this environmental stance. That's kind of what consumers are looking for, that extra step. And then changing gears here a little bit, I want to talk about made-to-order manufacturing and also closed-loop manufacturing, because this is something that we're seeing emerge in other sectors. And there's this great quote here from Tom Dixon in Design magazine, but fashion is adapting as well. And the direct-to-consumer brand Pangaea, they're a manufacturer and they're also a design label. And they've got these special pre-order collections where the clothes are actually created based on order volume. And it enables this clarity around the supply chain for the consumer, but also for the manufacturer. And then Australian brand Prelude have an e-commerce shop that features this range of designers in a virtual showroom. And every piece they've got is made to order. So it allows for more sustainable production, but it also provides cash flow to emerging designers and eliminates items and collections that don't trade well. Because of the direct-to-consumer model, it kind of skips the middleman. And there's this real opportunity here for companies to begin testing made-to-order manufacturing in small batches, because it can help you identify white space product demand without too much upfront investment. So you can dip your toes in without following with your wallet. And then two other bits I want to call out here. Firstly, H&M's Loop is an in-store recycling system. And this machine transforms old garments into new garments in front of shoppers, and it educates them about the awareness and possibilities of sustainable manufacturing. And this transition to closed loop practices isn't going to take place overnight. So companies need to start evaluating the areas within their business that are ripe for closed loop possibilities and work towards a more scalable implementation. And then the last example here is the brand Organic Basics, and they've swapped their e-commerce site to a low carbon site. So it doesn't actually load any images before they're requested by the user. And this limits the amount of light which is emitted from the screen. But they also use low consumption fonts. And just while I was screenshotting this image, I saved 40 grams of CO2 when compared to a full website. So both of these are really good examples for consumers of brands taking an environmental stand. Next, I want to just touch on the rental economy, and this is continuing to resonate with consumers, and resell and subscription concepts are making their way into new categories. So one of these that you may be familiar with is Arrive Outdoors, and they deliver camping sets via FedEx straight to a customer's base camp. And then there's a UK example that I also want to mention called Landy Campies, and they provide high-spec Land Rover Defenders with roof tents and everything you need for an adventure ready to go. And both of these give consumers the ability to click and collect an outdoor experience. So they don't invest too much money up front, but it also reduces waste, and it makes it a cheaper and more eco-friendly choice. So the next macro trend or macro driver, and again, there's no surprise here for this trend. We've all been spending a lot more time indoors, and I'm coming to you from my living room in southwest London rather than a conference stage. And actually what we're seeing is this increase in the practice of restorative nesting. So even before the coronavirus pandemic, we were all spending a lot more time at home. And this home body mentality is impacting what we buy for the home, how we want to look and how we want it to feel. And this trend is driven by convenience and ease, but also homemaking and craft are growing in importance here. So home is becoming even more of a sanctuary, and we're forecasting this as an opportunity for brands to create a sense of comfort and consistency among consumers who are fearful and they're looking for solace. So this is going to drive an increased sense of autonomy for customers because their access to external spaces like restaurants and gyms is really limited. So life has moved from the external world into the home, and consumers are being forced to take increased control of their own experiences in a way that they haven't done before. And home has become the main site for professional and personal fulfillment. So consumers are using them as a way to exercise, to keep up fitness routines, and obviously, where they work and live and have all their leisure time. And if you look to data from last year, participation in sport is actually up. So Strava's data showed 1.1 billion activities were uploaded last year, which is the 33% increase. And overall, Strava's community grew by about 2 million new users each month. So this ties into this idea of home because, again, people are unable to participate in their usual activities, so they're swapping sports. So actually, walking was the top new activity on Strava. And presumably everyone on the app knew how to walk already. But the difference was that they started recording it and they started doing more of it. And the thing that I want to call out here is, as a result, people are becoming more connected to their local outdoors. So thinking back to that plogging example that I mentioned earlier, you're more likely to look for hiking trails nearby, and you're more likely to explore them. And if you're more likely to explore them, you're going to be more invested in your local outdoor space as a result. And then case in point, this is my local swimming pool in London, and it was 2 degrees, which is 35 Fahrenheit. I converted it because I know we've got an international audience. And, I've been swimming there every week during lockdown, and I'd never done that before I started working from home and had the freedom to do that. And what we're seeing is an influx of people into their local outdoors who may not have been using it before. So when the only thing you can do is go for a run, you're a lot more likely to do that. And consequently, you care a lot more about what happens to your local pool or your park or your local area. And then SwimDem is a really nice example here. So they use social swimming as a way to get more people swimming, to make the sport more inclusive, less solitary, and also to use local pools. And for consumers, this means suddenly having their interest piqued in a new sport or a new activity. And it's exciting, but it's also intimidating because you don't know where to begin. And we're going to cover this a lot more in the next section around consumers looking for new activities and looking to give them a try. So the next trend is the frugal economy. And we're entering the second major recession in a generation, and consumers globally are tightening their belts. And we're increasingly seeing this emergence of the make, do, and mend attitude. So with jobs at risk and this general sense of uncertainty because of the pandemic, consumers are looking to reuse and repair rather than replace. And the interest in creative crafting that's emerged in lockdown, as well as a confidence for taking on home improvement projects and gardening, is kind of fusing with sustainability. And these are emerging as priorities because of the pandemic. So this make, do and mend attitude is being celebrated, and it's also providing a sense of satisfaction for consumers. And this self-sufficiency is also contributing to the rise of the circular economy that we spoke about earlier. And consumers are shifting their spending habits, and they're preparing for this recessionary long haul. And this is combined with the rise of frugal living. And increasingly, we're seeing cottagecore, which is a fashion trend around living off the land, becoming a lot cool, becoming very, very cool again. And more people are gardening, and they're growing their own food, and they're finding that this is having a powerful effect on mental health and mental well-being. And it's actually giving rise to a trend that we're calling hipsteading, which is encompassing everything from beekeeping through to raising chickens, baking bread, making kombucha, all sorts. And this shift doesn't just apply to consumers in the suburbs or rural areas. Everyone is embracing hipsteading. They're scaling back on consumerism. They're adopting more environmentally friendly practices. And they're also shopping for more locally produced goods and food. So, even if you are in New York and it's just growing a small herb garden on the window box, this mindset really works at any scale. It does go from farm all the way through to flat. And it's about creating a sense of sufficiency through an activity as much as it is about feeling in control and feeling connected to nature. And really, for brands to tap into this mindset, it's all about thinking local and scaling relevant products for rural or urban use, and creating campaigns that acknowledge this idea and this dream of living the good life. And part of this, from a brand perspective, is offering repair. So we've tracked the rise of retailers offering repair and aftercare for consumers who are looking to make clothes last longer. But actually, increasingly, people are taking it into their own hands. So DIY fashion is thriving on TikTok. And in February last year, Harry Styles, who used to be part of One Direction, went on stage and he was wearing a cardigan, and everyone went crazy for the cardigan. And people were trying to work out the exact crocheting pattern to be able to recreate their own. And what they were doing is they were sharing these patterns, they were sharing how they got on TikTok, and showing people how they could create this $2,000 garment themselves. And actually, in response, the designer, J.W. Anderson, released detailed sewing instructions and a pattern and praised the efforts of everyone who was trying to recreate the cardigan. And we're also seeing this trend emerge in products. So in October last year, Levi's and Lego collaborated on a collection that featured a Lego base plate in the garments, and it allowed customers to create their own custom designs. And then the other image on this slide is Nike, who had these tearaway Air Force One, and you could tear away the swoosh to reveal different colors underneath, which allow customers to customize their shoes and also to encourage creativity. So this is very much driven and emerging on Depop and TikTok. And Gen Zers are modifying and customizing and reselling items. And the way to think about this is that ecosystems are increasingly becoming linked. So TikTok, Instagram, Depop, and the way Gen Z are using them is becoming linked as well. So they're becoming their own stylists, their own photographers, their own marketing directors, their own retailers. And it's important that brands think about how to extend the life of their products, because this matters to young people. So the question should be, is it recyclable? Is it resellable? Is it reusable? Because that's the way that Gen Z are thinking about products which they're purchasing. And then again, this frugality is developing in some really interesting ways in the active and outdoor space. So with new participants in sport or people who've picked up new hobbies, they're unable to learn from meeting people in real life. And they're turning online to share tips and tricks with how to save money and how to explore the basics and anything you need to know as a first-time person getting involved. And again, there's a real opportunity for brands here to enter this space to provide these tips and tricks and frugal fixes for this price-conscious audience. And then here, similarly, communities of people are actually coming together to share locations for activities. So the best places to hike, the best places to go camping. And again, these are lowering the barriers for entry for new people who might be very eager to try, but a little bit unsure. And then something else I want to call out in this space, which again isn't new, but it's developing in some interesting ways. And this is challenging the idea of what a travel influencer is and moving away from this idea of posting kind of photos by the pool or in restaurants. And actually, the ever-growing popularity of the van life movement, which is converting a van into a camper and traveling the country or in some cases the world, is increasing. And obviously, this is grounded firmly in the hippie trail and isn't something new, but we're seeing it emerge as a popular and desirable way to travel. So to embrace this minimalist approach, only taking what you can carry, is new for younger generations. So this trend is grounded in frugal, but at the other end of the spectrum, it is also taking a luxe approach. So actually in the US, Mercedes Sprinter vans are in backorder at a number of dealers because boomers are doing this as a post-retirement project and are actually converting vans into premium lodgings and then traveling around the US. So before we conclude, I want to share a few of the key consumer groups of this year. And if you're a WGSN subscriber, you should be able to find information on these groups on the site. If not, there's a bit.ly link at the end, which will give you access to our white paper, and you'll be able to get in contact with the account team from there. So first up, the hike beasts. And I'm sure any city dwellers among us have encountered them themselves, and they're premium, they're fashion focused, and they're brand obsessed. And this is a growing cohort of streetwear fans that are embracing the great outdoors, but they're also prioritizing sustainable values. And this cohort is all about brands and functional clothing. So think high-tech fabrics, collaborations, and a brand's sustainable credentials here are now a real marker of luxury and clout. And this combination of exclusivity, style, and the more luxurious end of the sustainability spectrum is pitch perfect for image-focused streetwear fans. So newness is a key part of the appeal here, and brands are tapping into this by doing limited edition drops. So the Palace and Rafa collaboration down there, but I, of course, missed out on this because I think everyone did. But, you know, we've mentioned them again already. The next image, the ethical streetwear label Pangaea have built sustainability into the core of its business, and they're researching and developing these new materials to make sustainability the norm in fashion. So they're using seaweed fiber, food waste, plants, fruits, vegetables. They're even treating t-shirts with peppermint oil in order to save water. And each of the brand's collections is created by using the latest in materials and technology. So last year, they actually made a vegan puffer jacket, which had a replacement for goose and duck down, and it's completely biodegradable, it's hypoallergenic, and crucially, it's cruelty-free as well. And then finally, the other space to think about, because it's emerging and it's growing increasingly, is the impact of the third platform and third platform fashion. So exclusive collaborations on Animal Crossing or in the sports space, you know, thinking about Zwift and partnering to do limited edition drops works really well for this cohort. The next consumer group are the frugal newbies, and these are outdoor first-timers, and they're not used to spending long periods of time outdoors. And thinking back to that home hub trend, these are consumers that have just taken up running or hiking, and they're getting stuck in, but they're also a little bit unsure. So these are kind of low impact, high engagement. They're not scaling mountains, but they are building a positive routine each week. And again, for this cohort, it's all about functionality and value. So they don't want to spend huge amounts of money on expensive kit. They want multi-purpose, multifunctional garments. And a real space to win here is around the commuter. So anything that can be worn while you're cycling to work, while you're in the office, or, you know, if you go out for a hike. And we've seen the rise of more formal but functional backpacks. that you can attach to your bike or you can wear on your back, and then you can take them into a meeting and you can put them down on the table and they don't look out of place amongst everyone else's work bags. And as we mentioned, if this cohort are getting outdoors, then they want to rent. They're value focused. They don't want to spend huge amounts of money buying skis or a canoe or a bike until they know that they're going to continue doing it. So rental is a really big opportunity here, and especially the convenience of brands like Escape Pod or Arrive, which offer these pre-packed pods of camping or hiking gear. So if this cohort are buying, it's multifunctional and multi-purpose they're looking for, multi-value, and they are growing core cohort, core market to keep an eye on. And then the final cohort are probably the most serious about the outdoors, and these are a premium group, and they're focused on convenience, but they're also willing to commit to higher value purchases for quality items. And a real space to win here is around lifetime guarantees, the direct-to-consumer model, and repairing or updating items. And they're buying into your brand for the long term, so it's important that you find ways to support them. So with the pandemic happening, they've got a lot more time to plan these ambitious local and domestic trips, and they're looking for this sense of adventure. And they're also not just focused on a product need, they want an experience, and they want to buy into a brand's values. If you're investing at a higher price point for a tent or some gear, and you want to make sure that you're able to look after it, and for many people who live in cities, they just don't have the space or the resources. So actually, some of you may have seen this, but in Japan, Snow Peak are offering this convenient warehouse for you to store your camping equipment in. So users can deposit and remove items through an app, which are then stored in these humidity controlled environments. And 12-month storage is about $130. So potentially there's an idea here for those of you who are wondering what to do with your retail spaces. This is an opportunity to test a subscription model, but also to build brand affinity. And then staying with Snow Peak, they've also been working to expand their range of tiny homes and campsites. And they're offering this more premium version of glamping. And then moving over to a slightly different sector, interestingly, Hyundai in South Korea have incorporated a camping experience into their actual car test drive program. And then thinking about innovation in the space, a new product by Descent, which is exclusive to China, fuses apparel and technology. And this brand's ski jacket is equipped with an iWarm app that controls heating within the jacket. And then I think the last example here, which really sums this cohort up, is Canyon. And I'm a big, big advocate of Canyon. And they are a direct-to-consumer cycling brand. And that's a real disruptor in the cycling space, because this company provides an online, a seamless online experience. And it includes everything from sizing, positioning. They've got risk-free shipping. The product comes in an easy-to-assemble way that even someone who's never ridden a bike before can put it together. And they're also progressive. They've also got their own professional Zwift e-racing team. So they're moving into that third platform that we spoke about earlier. So the key takeaways here, firstly, appeal to all consumers. So the outdoor space is becoming more diverse and it's becoming more inclusive, and ensure you're creating products and services for consumer groups outside the main outdoorsy narrative. And this includes BIPOC, people of all ability, as well as budget conscious shoppers. Remember, not everyone is trying to scale the Dawn Wall every weekend. Some people are just going for a hike. The next one are think about tech add-ons. So technology usually doesn't have a place in outdoor trips, but less experienced travelers are looking for smart add-ons. So Merrill have a voice-activated service that allows users to discover new hiking trails while on the go. Or think about Descent's jacket that we mentioned earlier with the heat tech, where you can heat it up yourself. Thirdly, video makes a comeback. So customers are already sharing product tips and hacks online, and really there's a lot of opportunity here to join the conversation. So creating concise, easy to follow instructional videos that show how to best use or repair your product are really key. Join that conversation. And then finally, leverage the locals. So consumers are facing a multitude of problems and challenges this year. And we're going to be looking for support wherever they can find it. So again, thinking back to the fact that trust in governments is continuing to drop and there's this increase in local solidarity, there's really an opportunity here to connect with consumers and build long-lasting relationships by supporting the local initiatives that matter to them. So thank you very much if you made it to the end. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation, and feel free to email me or follow me on Instagram. And if you scan that bit.ly link, you'll get access to our latest white paper with a lot of the information that we featured here today. And there'll also be access to contact our accounts team as well if you want to consider a WGSN subscription. Thank you very much, everyone.
So this year, I thought, why not get into shipbuilding instead of getting an icon pass? I just find shipbuilding so relaxing. Definitely don't regret not getting an icon pass. Shipbuilding's way better.